Oh, I have. Oh yeah, I have the video. Yeah.
Thank you guys. Don't be shy. We're also going to start with a video, which was one of the first videos that I put together.
Yeah, I thought that was a good film.
Mom, Dad, I'm a lesbian. I like girls. Oh, sweetheart. We always knew. The bottom line, we just want our children to be happy. We love you regardless. You're a great soul. Oh, thank you guys. Oh, also, I think I might be a conservative. I don't understand. Hey, get that camera out of my wife's face. Guys, it's totally fine. It's okay. I just, think a little more conservatively. Sweetheart. Yeah. Look, it was a crazy election cycle, a lot of emotions. We're going to get you somebody to talk to, and you're going to work through this entire map. No, Dad, this is who I am. Oh, what about Beyonce? Yeah, what about Beyonce? You like Beyonce, you love Beyonce. Beyonce is a liberal. What's going on? I still do. It's just as a general rule, I don't think the Billboard 100 should dictate my political alignments. And what about all of our Spanish-speaking friends? I knew there were too many Caucasian people in this neighborhood. Oh, that's good, honey. Mm-hmm. Make me the bad guy, Mrs. I can't live without those hedges. Well, we're going to need those hedges when the neighbors find out that our daughter is in the KKK. What? Guys, this is getting completely out of hand. Mom, I'm still black, and I still like Hispanic people. I simply think that we should maybe put the economical future of this country ahead of the social issues. That is all. Sweetie, can you please just be gay?
Okay, so I always feel like when I show that video now, I have to always make it super clear that I'm not actually gay. The last few times I showed it, I had people coming up to me after telling me that I was such a brave lesbian and they were so proud of me and that we need more brave lesbos in the movement. I totally agree. We definitely need more outspoken gay conservatives. This was a skit. I'm also not a mom or a dad. Okay, so this is actually, let me get this microphone in a good spot. There we go. So this is actually a perfect place to start, which is with this video. I uploaded this video in mid-August of last year, almost 6 months ago to the day my entire life changed. I'm not talking about the exposure that it afforded me, which is why I'm here. I'm talking about my actual being. My life as a black woman was instantly transformed. And transformed isn't even really the right word, because a transformation implies that there was some metamorphosis or change within me. A more accurate word would be rescinded. My life as a black woman was instantly rescinded. It's actually really curious if you think about it. I had spent 27 years allowed to live as I am, and yet a 2-minute satirical stab at the truth, which is that being conservative today is like being gay in the 80s. It was all it took for people to begin undressing my blackness. In the comment section, I was labeled a coon, I was called an Uncle Tom, I was called a house Negro, I was called a race traitor. I was referred to as a bed wench, which if I'm being completely honest, I had no idea what that was. I thought it sounded super comfortable. And then I found out that it turns out that a bed wench is the slave that sleeps with the master, so that's pretty abhorrent. Next up came the media hits. I had Salon.com, which is everybody's favorite leftist website, write an article about me entitled, "Meet Candace Owens, the toxic right's newest African-American star." Of course, the writer of the article never even attempted to contact me because life hack, you do not need any facts to write a hit piece. And it was laced with severe inaccuracies. For example, it said that I urge black people to vote Republican, which I have never done in my entire life, nor have I ever said in any of my videos. In fact, I am not a registered Republican. Next came an article that was entitled "A Black Tommy Lahren?" ? Good one. And my personal favorite article was entitled, "What is the true race and ethnicity of Candace Owens?" This was an investigative piece where someone took the time to stalk each and every one of my maybe family members on Facebook and come to wild conclusions about our ancestry. For example, they discovered that there was someone who could be my aunt who was wearing a hat that had a Puerto Rican flag stitched onto it. Therefore, it was fair to speculate that I might be Puerto Rican, which is news to me. They found my grandmother's obituary and determined quite accurately that she was from the Virgin Islands. Therefore, it was fair to them to speculate that I did not descend from American slavery. Therefore, I could not stake my claim to true American blackness. These petty little earthquakes that ensued after I posted that video helped me to understand one thing, that being black is apparently fickle. It's apparently a membership to a club where one must abide strictly by a set of ideological rules or else be ejected swiftly without any chance for any redemption. And that is an amazing phenomenon. Because if the left's thesis is that blackness is best demonstrated by conditions of struggle, I can't imagine a better poster child for that than me. Here are some things about me and my personal life that you will definitively not find on the internet. The earliest memories of my childhood were living in an apartment with my two sisters and I squished into a shared bedroom in a low-income building. Every few months or so, we'd have to remove all the pots and pans out of our tiny little kitchen and put them in plastic bags so that the exterminator could come spray and kill some of the roaches that lived with us. My mother did her best to keep the apartment clean, but in these sorts of building developments, you really are who your neighbors are. Speaking of my mother, she did not graduate high school. She spent her childhood in and out of group homes as one of 9 children, and she became pregnant with her first child, my brother, at 17 years old. Despite her academic failures, my mother was naturally a bright young woman, and I can't say for certain, but I think she would perhaps contribute that to her knack for reading. My mother loved books. Novels became her mental escape from poverty growing up. This is perhaps why, despite the fact that we lived in a roach-infested apartment, my mother would march us to the local library every weekend to pick out books to read. And that is exactly when I inherited my love for books. I was the fastest reader at the library. They would measure the amount of books we read with these paper caterpillars, and they would extend the length. And my caterpillar was wrapped around the entire children's room twice. I was reading well ahead of my peers and ahead of my sisters. At the age of 9, my grandparents, who lived in a middle-class neighborhood in Connecticut, made the decision that they didn't want their grandchildren to grow up in the conditions of our building, so they moved our family of 6 into their home. Retrospectively, this afforded me my very first break in life. We were at max capacity in their home, so much so that my parents lived in the basement and my sister and I lived in the attic. And yet I refer to this as my first break in life because I began to live under my grandfather's rules. My grandfather was extremely strict. He believed very much in structure and hard work. That's because he held his first job when he was just 5 years old. He was born onto a sharecropping farm in North Carolina, and his first job was to wake up before the sunrise to lay tobacco out to dry in an attic. He would tell us stories about the KKK arriving on horseback at night and shooting into his home because they took issue with his father. They would also burn crosses on his lawn. My grandfather made sure that we had a very real understanding of our history, so you'll have to forgive me for not buying into the left's narrative that Trump is a racist, and that America is somehow more racist today than it was back then. Every morning, my grandfather would make us read passages out of the Bible while he would fix us a big Southern breakfast. He and my grandmother were extremely, extremely religious. They married at the age of 17. They remained married until her dying day 5 years ago. What's interesting is that having grown up during the civil rights era, my grandfather is what I think we would all refer to today as a classical liberal. It shocks him today when I speak to him and I tell him that all of these values that he instilled in us growing up, hard work, religion, marriage, and family, are laughed at by liberals today. They're conservative positions to hold. You have to imagine how interesting that is to him to hear, and you have to imagine how interesting it is to me, which I've grown up in a household with a man that was attacked regularly by the KKK. How odd it is to read stories questioning whether my family is even black, all because I said, Mom, Dad, I'm a conservative. The most curious thing to me is that there's an underlying paradox in all of this. The message that I preach is simply that I believe in black people. I believe black people can do it without handouts. My entire life has taught me that even with economic or educational odds stacked against you, you can make it. My grandfather started on a sharecropping farm in the South, and today he is retired. He and my grandmother went back and purchased that sharecropping farm in North Carolina, and they built their house upon it. It's actually because of my roots that I'm incapable of looking at my existence as a black person as a handicap. I also don't look at my anatomy, my womanhood, as a hurdle. Perhaps if I was living in Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, my position might be a little different, but I live in America, which is the most diverse country in the entire world, and it's the greatest country in the entire world because there is no other country where there's more economic opportunity for people of all different colors and creeds, and that is an indisputable fact. The paradox today is that if you believe in black people, you somehow betray them. Simply stated, confidence is considered anti-black. It's a controversial attribute to possess. This is, of course, all due to the philosophical sleight of hand the Democrats have played through their near dominance of our academia, our media, and most importantly, our culture in Hollywood. They've effectively brainwashed entire groups of people into supporting ideas that are ultimately harmful to themselves. I feel that the black allegiance to the Democratic Party is proof of that. You know, the first time that I was accused of betraying my race, I was 10 years old. I was in 5th grade, and I got a lot of the answers correct on a standardized test. Prior to standardized testing, our classes were largely mixed, meaning that students from all over the intellectual spectrum were in every class. Incidentally, my best friends were Christina, a Spanish girl, and Alex, a black girl. They were my best friends because they were in all of my classes. You make friends with whoever you're exposed to. It's really not that complicated. But after standardized testing and as an intro into middle school, I hardly ever saw those two girls ever again. My new best friends were all white. That's because they were in all of my classes. You make friends with whoever you're exposed to. It's really not that complicated. On a go-forward basis, there would be just one black girl in my class and just one black guy in my class, and I was friends with both of them. And yet somehow I was accused of acting white. And that's about the time that all the bullying started. I had this one girl, who I will never forget, her name was Tiana. And every single time I would pass her in the hallway, she would come up to me and she would bump my shoulder. She was really bony and I was really bony, so it kind of hurt. And she could literally be anywhere. She could be 14 degrees due west of the cafeteria. I could be 18 degrees due east of the library. She would come find my shoulder and she would bump it. There would be no exchange, just the ram, which was just to let me know that she didn't like me. She didn't approve of me. Then there was Janelle. Janelle was a giant. She was a very tall black girl. And every time I would walk down her classroom hallway, she would jump in front of me and absolutely humiliate me with some comment about how I looked. I remember one day I had worked up the courage in my mind, and I was like, when Janae stops me today, I'm going to say something back to her. And I was wearing these white Old Navy pants and a blue short sleeve shirt. And Janae pivoted in front of me and she says, don't you know you're not supposed to wear white after Labor Day? Actually, I had no idea. And I said to her, I can wear whatever I want. And I felt so good about that. And I scurried off quickly, hoping that she wouldn't punch me in the face. And she didn't punch me in the face, so it was actually a really good day for me. Then there was Sheena, who delivered to me what I will always remember as the most embarrassing day. I shouldn't even say middle school career, the most embarrassing, awful day of my entire educational career. Sheena was this freakishly beautiful black girl who all the guys liked, who was in none of my classes for the same reasons, and who I only saw at lunchtime because she sat diagonally from me at a table. If you think of middle school really like the movie Mean Girls, then Sheena's lunch table would be described as the group of really popular black girls. One day Sheena calls me over, and we had never had any correspondence whatsoever. I'm eating a slice of pizza, and I walk over to her table and I say hi. And she says, can I ask you a question? It's really important to break here and tell you guys that during this phase of my life, I was racing home to read Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling was slowly releasing each and every installment of her novel, and my mother and I used to compete to see who could read it faster. I was deeply involved in the culture of wizardry, and pretty much nothing else. So I head over to Sheena's table, and I say, yes, Sheena, of course, you can ask me a question. And she asks me, if I was to say to you, holla, what would you say back? This was not a Harry Potter question. So I answered back with the first thing that popped into my mind, and I said, I would say hello. Wrong answer. The entire table erupted into laughter. The correct answer, for those of you who may have also been swept into the magical adventures of Harry Potter, was Holla Back Youngin'. It was the most popular hip-hop song on the airways at the time by rapper Fabulous. Mortified, I went home and I learned every single lyric of that song. I felt somehow that I had failed, and I will say that since that day, I have made a conscious effort to always be up to date on the most popular hip-hop songs. These are the scars of my childhood. I don't bring up these girls because they're my enemies. I bring up these girls because they're actually not. Shoulder bumping Tiana and I would 2 years later wind up in an elective course together, sewing, and after about 2 weeks of awkward tension, we broke conversation and we became friends. It turns out we had a lot more in common than she initially thought, and she said to me one day, "I didn't like you because I just thought you were trying to be white." And I said, "No, Tiana, I just make friends with whoever is in my classes. It's not that complicated." Once Tiana found out that I was cool, she mentioned it to Hollaback Sheena, who struck up a casual conversation with me in music class, and who a few weeks later said, "Candace, you sound mad white, but you're cool." Thumbs up, that was awesome to hear from Sheena. Last in line was Labor Day Janae, who after some standardized testing would end up in my freshman year high school math class. I was really terrible at math, and she and I would help each other try to pass the class, and she became not just friendly towards me, but someone that I would consider to be a good friend, even until this day. She would actually defend me when a new herd of high school black girls tried the exact same bullying tactics. In that regard, high school wound up being a hell of a lot easier than middle school ever was. The interesting part here is not that I got shoulder bumped a few times walking down a hallway. The interesting part is the reason why. The interesting part is that at the young age of 11 years old, these 3 young black girls already had an idea of what it meant to be black, and they each understood that I had somehow betrayed that definition. I had betrayed blackness by performing well on tests. I had betrayed blackness by speaking proper English. I had betrayed blackness by choosing novels and books over hip-hop music. At the young age of 11 years old, these 3 girls had already accepted a thesis that education betrays blackness. It's no wonder that 16 years later, declaring myself a conservative has somehow caused the exact same visceral rejection amongst my racial peers. Thomas Sowell, Dr. Ben Carson, Condoleezza Rice, Herman Cain, Larry Elder. These are some of the most educated black men and women in the political spectrum. They are conservative and they are rejected by their racial peers. These people, all alive today, have broken barriers and should be celebrated. They are living, breathing proof that no matter what your race or sex is, education is the ticket to success. Who taught black people to reject education? That is the question I ask myself all the time. Who taught black people that the only acceptable means of success are sports, hip-hop music, and of course, lending your black voice to lead other blacks toward further destruction, like Al Sharpton or the Black Lives Matter group? Do you know the odds of a man making it to the NBA, no matter what the color of his skin is? Only 2.3% of high school basketball players will play in the NCAA. Of those 2.3%, only 1% will be drafted to the NBA. These are the dreams that black people are conditioned to chase. Of course, what we are scratching at the surface of here is identity politics. The left's hitherto successful attempt to get people to abandon their individualism in favor of a collectivist mentality. So to them, I am not Candace Owens, who happens to be black. I am a black woman first, who happens to go by the name Candace Owens. The individual does not exist on the left. It's cultural Marxism pontificated. How is it defeated? I will leave you with this, which I read an amazing piece by Herman Cain entitled, "House Negroes Stand Up." He says, quote, "The good news is that millions of black people are not drinking the name-calling brand of Kool-Aid. We are thinking for ourselves, telling people the truth, serving our country, and pursuing the greatness of America and the richness of our futures. Being called a house Negro is just one of the insulting names I've been called as an American black conservative, simply because I do not subscribe to black liberal, backward-looking narrative of black identity politics. If being called a house Negro is what some of us must endure for succeeding in this nation and thinking for ourselves, then let all the house Negroes stand up and be counted," end quote. I can't think of a more beautiful way to put that than the words of his statement. The politics of identity will only be defeated by an ideological revolution, with people like me standing up unabashedly against assaults on our character. Being called Tommy Lahren, a coon, house Negro or having my ancestry called into question seems like an extraordinarily small price to pay for my freedom. Thank you, guys. Take some questions. Yes. Start with your name.
I'm Marissa.
Hi, Marissa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So obviously in your video, you were coming out to your parents. What are your actual parents' political beliefs? Are they similarly conservative?
No, it didn't go down like that. There was no mass freak out. My mother is very much a Democrat. We could not disagree with each other more when it comes to our ideology. And a large contributing factor to that is the fact that she didn't graduate high school. So it's hard, to understand your history accurately when all you're really understanding are, tidbits from CNN, MSNBC. My dad, he's voted both ways, and he's just coming further and further to the right. He's watching all my videos, and I yell at him all the time. So they accept that I'm no longer on the left, so I don't have any issues with my family. But no, my sister just recently is now a little more on the right because she got money back. Tax cuts. She got it. All it took was a bonus. So I always say the best way to destroy leftist narrative is with results. Questions? Yes.
Or just in general, I don't think everyone knows your story. So how did you become? What opened your eyes? I think that's something that most people.
Yeah. So is anybody familiar with the Gamergate scandal? Okay, you guys probably know that that's how Milo Yiannopoulos sort of shot into fame. So a few years ago, in the beginning of 2016, I was trying to start my own tech company. It was supposed to be for an anti-bullying software to sort of help high school students navigate the internet. Obviously, this was in the middle of an absolute firestorm between the left and the right, in the middle of the presidential race, and I put up a Kickstarter video, which was 3 minutes long, and in the video I said, what we are doing is figuratively unmasking trolls. Apparently that caused a fire alarm at Twitter. They thought that we had actually developed a technology to unmask trolls, and within, I would say, 24 hours, I had a girl that was working for Twitter, the anti-harassment arm of Twitter, called me and pretty much threatened me to take down the project. And when I declined, a swarm of leftist media, New York Magazine, the Washington Post, were trying to run smear pieces on me. The New York Magazine ran the piece. It was a gaslighting piece because I had noticed what they were afraid of was that we were going to recognize that Twitter was running a unit of trolls that were for the election campaign. So imagine what anonymity affords on the internet. Let's say I'm just a girl behind my computer and I'm white and I go on the computer and I pretend that I'm a Trump supporter, but I'm really a Hillary supporter, right? So if you could pretend to be a Trump supporter and be anonymous, why not go over to Black Lives Matter people on Twitter and start calling them the N-word? And then what happens? The next day, the press runs stories saying that Trump supporters are racist. So they were able to create an entire narrative that Trump supporters are racist by these anonymous accounts. So when I spoke out about it, when I said on my Twitter that Twitter was actively involved in trolling to try to sway the election, the next day I had all of these huge media companies trying to smear me. So I always say I was force-fed the red pill. I don't recommend it. I felt like I was figuratively kicked in the chest, Spartan style, and it was a lot to go through. I was like suffering from cognitive dissonance. I was someone that believed that liberals had the best intentions at heart.
Go to college
Right.
before she thinks like this. So how do we change that negative connotation, perhaps, on your mom or other women who haven't gone to college, and also embrace them and try to show them how conservatism is best for all of us?
That is a very great question. So the way that I try to do things, I talk about all the time how political jargon can sometimes box people out. They speak over people's heads, and it's very. We have to start putting things in layman terms. That's what I try to do in each of my videos. Every topic that's happening, I try to just make it like common sense. Don't talk about things that maybe they don't understand. A lot of people don't even understand that it takes 60 votes. So it's very easy in that regard for the media to constantly contrive a narrative because people don't even understand how the government that they live under works. So I think one of the most important things you can do is And I think, by the way, Donald Trump is very great at this, is he knows how to talk like the everyday person to make them understand things. So, and I actually am really happy to see that on YouTube. So many people are popping up. It's not just me, political commentators that are just talking about things as if you're talking to your best friend in class. So that would be, I think that's what I try to do, and that's what I think is definitely the best solution. I see a hand over here. Yeah.
When did the left start employing identity politics?
Employing.
Like this type of rhetoric of, different groups, division.
I think they listen, we can talk about LBJ and his Great Society. Obviously, I'm more well-read, and I study more in terms of when black people started feeling this allegiance to the Democratic Party. But I think that it's something that happened definitely around when LBJ was in office. They started to understand the benefits of keeping a narrative, the benefits of getting people onto these government systems of dependency, and it's similar to what's going on with DACA right now. It's them trying to create an allegiance between the Democratic Party and Spanish people, or rather illegal immigrants. So I think that that's kind of where it started, and they're just kind of shifting the scope in terms of who they target, which is why it's so important for them to keep breaking people down into so many different groups. One of the things I talk about the most is like the LGBTQ community. Like, how crazy that they're all looped in together. It doesn't even make sense. Like, what does being gay, right, a man wanting to sleep with another man, have anything to do with being trans, right? It's totally different things, but they loop you in to sort of create this collectivist mentality, and it's dangerous. People don't start seeing themselves as a person, like as who they are and what they think, and only value themselves by what color they are, or what sex they are, or who they want to love. It's problematic. They become easy fodder, I think, for the left. Yes?
Hi, my name's Annie. So I was just wondering, so what do you think about Obama, and kind of just has he fueled this fire, or how has he affected the left and the right and the relationship they have today?
So Obama's a sad story because I was in college, like pouring my face off when he got elected in 2008, and I was one of those people that cried watching him win. I just thought that this was the change that we needed. I mean, obviously, you can imagine growing up with my grandfather's stories and seeing a black man go into office, what that represented to the black community, especially people that came from nothing. It was hope, it was change. And the policies weren't really adding up, especially his foreign policies. And he wasn't doing anything for black people, especially for what's going on in Chicago, and where I think where he did the most damage is creating this false sentiment that we are somehow living in the 60s, and that racial issues and racial tension is an everyday thing that black people have to go through. Okay, that's just pointedly ridiculous. I've been all over. My grandpa's from the South. I go down south. I come back up north. I've never walked in and gone, oh my God, a white person. Am I going to get called the N-word here? That's so. What he did in terms of creating the war on police is especially disgusting. But I think what he was doing was setting up this narrative, because it's very easy. Over 90% of black people vote Democrat. That's insane. I never preach, like I say, I never say that black people vote Republican. I would just like to see some numbers that represent that people are thinking for themselves. So yeah, I think that's kind of one of the most dangerous things that Obama did, was create this false narrative of racism in America as a real issue that we're going through every day, and especially the war on cops. I couldn't be more against that. Thanks. Sir. I love your hair.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
My name is David.
David.
You mentioned before, you were talking before a little bit about how YouTube is becoming more popular. I just wanted to know, what is your day-to-day process? Like, how do you make videos, and what would be your suggestion to any startup, like anyone starting on YouTube?
It's so funny because so that video I shot by myself. My cousin was helping me. I just told her when to press play, and I edited it that was shot within an hour, and edited within an hour. It was really super simple. My videos, if you've seen any more of them, are just rants. Everyone thinks that I have a team around me in the studio. I open my laptop and I yell at it. If you see the process, is literally me going and then I drop it into iMovie, and I take out some spaces in between, because I think jump cuts are important because people have such a short attention span. So if you follow my Twitter feed, I literally am retweeting so many other people that are young YouTubers that are just getting their voice out there, because I'm so happy to see it. And I think it's important because I am convinced that right now we are going through a real movement in this country. And I'm not talking about because of Donald Trump. I'm not talking about whether it's conservative or liberal. I'm talking about black people waking up. I see it every single day in my inboxes. I have black kids reaching out to me saying, thank you, something's not adding up, nothing's really changed, and now we're seeing some results, so we're being told to keep being afraid. So as much as I can add a megaphone, but the easiest process, I'm telling you, is just yell at your MacBook. Yes?
Hi, sorry if you've already talked about this. I know it's a little late, I'm sorry, but you mentioned the South, and I don't know what experience you've had in the South, but it's often ridiculed up north here as being racist, backward, segregated. I know when I visited the South, things seemed actually more integrated. When I went to the mall,
Yeah.
there was more diversity than here in New York, where
Yeah.
things can be segregated.
Right.
I don't know what your experience has been, if you can make that sort of comparison.
It's hilarious. I mean, just think about the fact that the majority of the black population lives in the South. If the South is so racist, why the hell are black people living there? Well, if they can willingly live up here. So yeah, it's 100%. I talk about it all the time because my entire family lives down south. North Carolina, Virginia, Alabama, and it's not real. And I value things, and people are so shocked by that I value my day-to-day experiences above what CNN tells me. Like, people are so shocked that I don't understand my life through the lens of Fox or CNN. I understand it through what happens to me every single day. And that's kind of what I'm always encouraging people to do.
So,
I was gonna, because she didn't get to go. I'll
Yeah,
go right
she-
to you. Go ahead.
Okay, exactly what policies do you think do you recommend should be implemented or taken down in order to truly support the African American community?
Okay, so I've got a few for that. All right, so the numbers, I guess I'll give you two that I think are the most important. It's amazing to me that Black Lives Matter exists and they're not actually talking about how to benefit Black lives or focus on police violence, which happens never, right? I mean, I think in 2016, 16 unarmed black men were killed by police. If you would watch the TV during the election cycle, you would think that it was happening every 5 minutes. Policies that should be changed. We should see, if Black Lives Matter wants to be taken seriously, they should be protesting Planned Parenthood. 800 black babies are aborted every single hour since 1973. 17 million black babies were killed. And that entire Planned Parenthood came from Margaret Sanger, who was talking about eugenics. So that is the biggest threat to the black lives. You want to talk about the fact that our population has decreased that much since 1973, which is why actually right now the Spanish population is on track to surpass us. Other than that, I would say we should, speaking of Spanish population, we should be talking about border security. That's why I'm conservative. Think about all of the ways negatively the black community is affected by the fact that the illegals are here. I have a cousin, all of my family's on welfare, I talk about that all the time. I have a cousin who was trying to get Section 8 housing, which is a welfare system, and she was declined because illegal immigrants are on it. That's crazy. It's insane to me that we're taking care of people in another country faster than we're taking care of our own people. So I'm super against it, and that's part of the reason why I'm so conservative, because I'm hyper focused on what's helping the black community and what's hurting the black community. Okay, I'm gonna give her.
it's fine.
Can you comment further on how your aversion to identity politics, or your kind of revelation about its folly, evolved into an ideological, policy-based conservative?
Sure. So I tell people all the time that I was on the left and I came to the right, but I want to be super clear. I wasn't necessarily a liberal. I wasn't outside wearing a pussy hat, you know what I mean? And screaming for things that didn't belong. I think, and this is something that Democrats have been very successful at, is that they keep black people so busy with their problems that they created, right? Welfare system. Black people are focused on what I was focused on growing up, coming from a family with no money, paying their bills. Right? They have children out of wedlock. They're focused on where food is coming from for their baby. They don't give a shit, pardon my language, about what's happening on CNN. They don't give a shit about, pardon my language, about how many votes it takes to pass this or that. They only look up when they're told to look up every 4 years when Democrats knock on the door and say, you're about to lose everything. Racism's right around the corner. Quick, vote for us, remember. And we actually learn in the academia that every time something good happened for black people, it was because of Democrats, and that is a lie. That is the big lie. And if you guys have not read Dinesh D'Souza's Hillary's America or Dinesh D'Souza's The Big Lie, I suggest you do it. Black people are not uneducated, they've been misinformed their entire lives. So for me, I went to college and then I had $100,000 in student loan debt. I don't have any support from my parents. I think I've been paying and living on my own since I was 16 years old. So my main concern out of college wasn't to pay attention to policies or to pay attention to politics. It was Sally Mae is calling me every 3 minutes and threatening to take my first child. How am I going to pay for this? So I immediately went to the city, got a job as an assistant, and I worked nonstop for 4.5 years. So in terms of, I think, and this is what I truly believe, is if we could get black people that are struggling to pay attention to why they're struggling. They don't even understand, because they're so focused on fixing, getting the next check, then they would all naturally be conservative. I mean, it's common sense. So, and I have almost experimented with that because, as I said, I have all these cousins that are on welfare and all these cousins that, are living in poverty, and they're all just, because of circumstances, coming to the right. So when my cousin Aniza came home and said, I got denied Section 8, because there are illegal immigrants that have Section 8. I sat down and explained to her, do you want to know why that is? Here's what DACA is. Here's what the DACA amnesty argument is about that you're not paying attention to. So that's kind of how it happened for me. It was much more natural. Sir?
So I would like to hear your opinions on the recent, maybe in the past year, the polarization of a lot of these big events. So for example, we just had the Grammys, and before that we had another award show.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, obviously this is going to get more and more. So what's sort of the outside of what's going to, what are your thoughts leading to that?
So what I've always found so interesting is that we learn about propaganda in school. We learn about, I was fascinated with Hitler. Like, I watched every documentary on Hitler. It's like creepy, honestly, on the History Channel I could possibly watch, because I was just so fascinated. Like, how could one man have convinced an entire country to participate in something so abhorrent? And the thing is, we don't realize when we're going through propaganda. Like, you can study it, but you don't understand when it's happening to you. So to bring up Dinesh D'Souza's Big Lie again, he talks very well about how they control the academia, the media, and culture, Hollywood, which is how they're able to sort of get out these lies constantly. It's how I was brainwashed, right? Because I'm a pretty smart girl, I should be able to figure out this isn't good for me, but when they're constantly blaring this stuff out. So Hollywood is just getting more aggressive because they are trying to hold on to this narrative and telling people what they should think. So I think, to answer your question, specifically during this time in Trump in office, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And to their credit, which is hard to find anything to Hollywood's credit at this moment, I don't even think they understand that they're being used. I really think that they believe in everything that they're saying. I mean, if you guys are not following Chelsea Handler on Twitter, she's like insane. She's lost it. I mean, she's really gone over the deep end. Alyssa Milano, these aren't the scholars. They aren't the great philosophers of our times. They don't understand what they're out there fighting for. Miley Cyrus doesn't know why she's crying, right? And she has she's sitting here crying. She's talking about women's issues, and she's crying for Hillary Clinton to put Bill back in office. I don't understand that, right? It makes no sense. If you are actually for women's issues, you should have been so anti-Hillary, who quite literally was so vicious towards Monica Lewinsky. She moved out of the country after that scandal, right? And Monica Lewinsky went to go live in the UK under a different name. So it's really crazy when you think about it. So it's really just a mass brainwashing, and I'm so happy that I'm like so alert and aware about it now. All right, you want to go? Last question.
Yeah. So you talk about kind of how black people are being deluded, and they're not. I'm not mischaracterizing you. They don't understand the true nature and origin of their problems. I just want to make sure I'm not.
Yeah.
So why is it that Oh, I'm sorry. That population is unable to see the truth, but like white Americans who overwhelmingly voted for Trump are able to see the truth? Because
the white Americans weren't targeted, the black community was with LBJ's Great Society. LBJ's Great Society, and to quote him directly, was that he was going to keep those niggers voting Democrat for the next 50 years. When he created the government system of dependency, it was to target black people.
So the Civil Rights Act was to target black people?
Yes, absolutely. To create the government dependency, everything that LBJ did, welfare programs that were supposed to help black people, welfare is hurting black people. You have to understand that. I mean, I understand this deeply because I'm from a family that is on welfare. So what happens is they literally, first off, incentivize you to keep having babies out of wedlock. If you don't understand the number one issue, another huge issue facing the black community is that the dads aren't there. They systematically broke down black families. That is what they did. Then they created them so that they're dependent on the government, that they're getting checks, and they never actually want to break the barrier of being impoverished, because here's what they do. They say, okay, you have no money, we're going to give you $1,000 a week. But let's say you go and you get a job and you start making $400 a week. They say to you, if you ever start making $500 a week, we're going to take your $1,000. So that means you're going to lose half your income. It's a scam. Okay, so the people are actively trying to not do better because they're trying to keep the $1,000 check that the government is giving them already.
So if you believe that the Civil Rights Act was part of the Great Society to target African Americans, you're opposed to the Civil Rights Act then?
Which elements of the Civil Rights is big? You're talking about, what specifically are you talking about?
the act as a whole.
No, you need to tell me specifically what you're talking about, because I'm not going to say I'm opposed to the Civil Rights Act. That's a crazy statement, but there's a lot of elements in it. So which
But the
specifically?
entire thing was part of the mentality of the Great Society that LBJ created.
What I'm against, yes, I'm against the Great Society. I'm against government handouts. I'm against the welfare system. Since you're not giving me a particular.
The whole act functions as a way to. I don't see why picking a particular part would matter. What I'm saying is
because you're asking me a specific question, so you need to give me a specific. You're saying you can't just put an umbrella on it. There's different parts of every act that's passed through government. So if you're asking me, I can tell you what I take issue with.
Okay, what in the Civil Rights Act do you take?
I just told you, LBJ's Great Society. The idea of this welfare programs to help Black society is ultimately hurting the Black society.
But that's not specific. What specific parts of the Civil Rights Act do you
How
take issue
much
with?
more specific could that possibly be?
You're saying what's helping Black society is hurting Black society. It's not specific. Like, what specific parts of the Civil Rights Act are you opposed to?
The welfare program.
That's it. So the rest of it you're fine with? So
If you're talking about just like the immersion of Black and white people in a society,
yes.
like of course I'm comfortable with that. I don't think that Black people, white people. I'm against welfare.
So it's
Do you
just
wanna take
welfare.
one
You
more?
don't think he was
I
targeting
feel like
people
we're going.
commercial?
I feel like we're going in circles a little bit. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you tell us more about Turning Point USA? And I think that the conservatives are losing the battle. Hillary got 3 million more votes.
Pardon, I didn't hear
Hillary
that.
got 3 million more votes.
Yeah.
And I think Congress is up for grabs. Impeachment will happen, for sure, if they take over. So anyway, Turning Point USA interests me because I know you and other young voices are part of that. It's critical that the message gets out there.
Right. So Turning Point USA, if you guys are not familiar with it, is they essentially mobilized students on campus because, as you can see, all of the campuses are overrun with liberal ideas. You don't even understand what they're talking about half the time. All of us when we were in college, and that's basically just because you don't live life. They're very easy community to target is students, because students don't really have concerns where they're paying close attention to economic policies and things of that nature. So what Charlie Kirk was able to do was mobilize conservative students on campus, give them a voice, and encourage them to run student races. So he's been tremendously successful at it. He was on the road with Donald Trump throughout the entire end of his election campaign, and it's unbelievable to see how much more the conservative voice is growing on campus. For those of you that are looking for inspiration, or even if you're not looking for inspiration, you just want to challenge the way that you think, I highly recommend that you attend the Student Action Summit that we do once a year. It's about 5,000 conservative students from all 50 states that get together, and you have some of the greatest speakers in the conservative movement, Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager. Everyone sort of descends, and we talk to the students about different issues. And you even get some dissenting voices, like Dave Rubin, who considers himself the last liberal, and he talks about why he's sort of been inching towards the right more and more because he sees that the language has gotten so scary. And I do think campuses are becoming scary for conservative voices. It's crazy to see what the professors say, what they're comfortable saying to students. I read a story about after Trump's election, a professor made everyone who voted for him stand up and promise the students that they weren't racist. I can't think of anything more awful than that. So that's kind of what the turning point is. We feel very strongly that we're on the brink of losing this country. And if we don't start mobilizing the youth and getting people to get involved and engage and have these conversations, then everything will be lost.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.